Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam, and today we have a familiar friend of the channel joining us after, a few months has it been since we
Yeah,
have
makes been
gotten
a few months.
together? Yes, this
Yeah,
is Baldfather Bets, as he's known on YouTube. Just look him up on YouTube. He tracks betting in the NFL and NCAA. He has a very successful record, so why don't you tell us about that?
yeah. We do everything based off of a unit at Baldfather Bets. So this year, NFL and college combined, we're 767, 613, and 19 in betting units. So really successful year for us. This is the first year that we started a channel and went public with it, but it tracks for how we've been doing the past 2 years as well. Actually, doing really well in college this year, so it's been a lot of fun.
Indeed. And the reason I brought him on here is because he clearly knows what he's talking about. College is the area this year where he has been the most successful. He is a Texas fan. That's another reason why I brought him on. But he is objective. So it's a really good combination that we have going on here. And before we talk about Texas versus Arizona State, reacting to that, but really, everyone, today's topic is going to be about the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State versus Texas, how that game will work out, and maybe even looking a little bit ahead to any of these teams playing in the national title game and how they'll face off against the teams in the Orange Bowl. I do want to encourage you all to subscribe to his channel. Again, go look up on YouTube, Baldfather Bets. Logo's a white background with two B's. And then if you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, my channel, because I know many of you watch, but some of you probably aren't subscribed even though you think you are. So make sure to click the big red subscribe button, like the video, share it around. Comment your thoughts down below because we are doing a giveaway worth $40 in total. $20 Visa gift card, $20 gift card to my merchandise store, and the winners of those, two of them will be announced at halftime of the Orange Bowl on my live show where we'll be doing play-by-play and color commentary for that game, and the other two will be announced at halftime of the Cotton Bowl where, again, we will be live doing play-by-play and color commentary. And if you want to support the channel or join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7, highly advise you do so. The links to those are in the description and also in the pinned comments, so check those out. But let's get into this. And I remember you told me during the Texas Arizona State game that you had about like 15 heart attacks, but you
Yeah,
survived and Texas advanced. I myself was very anxiety driven during the game because it was very exciting, despite the fact that it looked like it wasn't going to be for approximately three quarters. So, walk through what happened with Texas. Like, why did they blow that
yeah.
lead? And how, I guess, just how that plays into what Texas's strengths and weaknesses have been throughout the whole season.
Yeah. So I was at the game. So that actually helped with being able to see that all 22 view, right? Like I could see the total field. Um, First of all, this has been an issue with Texas under Sarkisian, and it's been an issue with Sarkisian coach teams where they get out to an early lead, and then they have a difficult third quarter, and they let other teams back in. It kind of happened a little bit against Clemson, just not quite as bad because Texas, retook control again. And the first drive out of halftime against Clemson, they got a first and goal at like the 3 yard line. They just didn't punch it in and they had to kick a field goal. So they actually did a better job in the third quarter against Clemson. Against Arizona State, it's a 24-8 game. There's like 6 minutes left in the game. Arizona State's at midfield. They throw an absolute prayer miracle halfback pass with Scadaboo while he's getting drilled. I don't know. It was so weird. I've watched it so many times. Manny Muhammad is right on the wide receiver. He sees the ball and then he just doesn't make a play on it. So wide receiver gets in, he makes a little contact with Muhammad, gets in front of the ball, catches it, and then has a walk-in path to the end zone. And then that changed everything, right? So Texas had really dominated the game at that point. The thing that had been concerning up until that point was how long their defense had been on the field. So I knew like if this does get to a point to where somehow ASU makes a run, that's going to catch up with Texas. And then even when you went into overtime, and it wasn't So they get that touchdown, and then Texas gets back out on the field, and Quinn throws a pick on the second play. And I didn't actually have an issue with people are like, why was Texas throwing deep balls and everything? People get mad at Sarkisian because when he has chances to win the game, he isn't aggressive enough. So I was actually happy that, hey, we're calling plays to win. We're being aggressive. We're fighting. We're trying to get more points. We're trying to put this game away. And it was the right read by Quinn. It was just the wrong throw. He needed a flatter, which that's been an issue with Quinn. Sometimes when he needs a flatter, stronger, faster throw, and he has it in his arsenal, he puts too much air under the ball, and then it allows defenders to kind of react to it. I mean, the last play against Washington in the semifinal where he threw the ball to A.D. Mitchell, if that's a shorter, flatter throw, there's a really good chance A.D. Mitchell makes that catch and they beat Washington. But he put so much air under it, defender was able to, Muhammad, now plays for Oregon, was able to knock it down. So, pick happens there, defense right back out on the field. At that point, I mean, they're exhausted. ASU is able to drive down the field again after a big halfback, a swing out to the halfback, wheel route to Scattaboo, and then obviously both 2-point conversions are good on both touchdowns. Then we get into overtime. Texas has the defense on the field first again, so defense is back out on the field there. They get him to like that 3rd and 13, and then Levitt, as he did all day long. I looked it up. No quarterback was pressured in any college football playoff game so far this year as much as Levitt was pressured against Texas.
Wow.
They only got to him though for sacks like 2 times. So they put pressure on him, but he was so escapable throughout that whole game. He was running for his life that entire game.
Yes.
But then he played one of the best games I've seen him play all year because he was throwing on the run. The throws were accurate. He was making the right reads. He was making the right decisions. Same thing happened on that 3rd and 13. He escaped it. He scrambled, was able to get the first down. And then on what Texas fans were losing their mind because it's an illegal play, it doesn't really matter now. Scattaboo scores the touchdown where the offensive lineman pulls him into the end zone, which you aren't allowed to do. That is against the rules, but it didn't matter, right? And they would have scored anyway. That was on 1st and goal from like the 1. So Texas's defense was exhausted. They were going to get in with Scattaboo at that point. So then that's when the, I guess, kind of heroics took over. So that's when the Quinn Ewers that we've seen before, the Quinn Ewers who played against Alabama and Tuscaloosa, the Quinn Ewers who played up in Michigan and Ann Arbor, the Quinn Ewers from the Big 12 title game against Oklahoma State last year, the Quinn Ewers against Texas A&M that played earlier this year, he took over and showed you why at the end of the day, there's an argument to be made that he has the highest ceiling of any college football quarterback, maybe other than Shedeur Sanders, because he will never have the mobility of Shedeur. But the check to get them in the right protection on the blitz from ASU, recognizing it's a zero blitz, the throw, the throw then to Gunnar Helm with the escapability. He's never going to run for a bunch of yards on you, but he is shifty in the pocket when healthy. So showing that, hey, the ankle's probably fine. The throw to Gunnar Helm, that was really all Quinn. And the 2 big run plays against Clemson, those were both audibles at the line by Quinn, recognizing what the defense was in and then shifting to it. So you get the good and you get the bad with Quinn. And in that game, you got the best, and that ultimately gave Texas the win. But ASU, man, hats off, I don't think. And then the classiness from Dillingham after the game, the love that you saw for Scattaboo from the Texas players, the guys praying together and everything. It was a really good display of college football after the game in terms of how Texas acted and how ASU acted. And I've been a big proponent. I went to high school out in Scottsdale, Arizona, so a lot of my friends went to ASU, and I've been a big proponent that Georgia Tech in Atlanta, ASU in Tempe, and then University of Houston in Houston are the 3 biggest sleeping giants in college football, just because everything's there. The facilities are there, warm weather, people want to come there, they have the money, they have the donors, they have the alumni base. So Dillingham has really kind of awoken that in ASU. That's good for college football.
Yeah, and I think that Levitt is a young QB, so if someone doesn't poach him or if they make sure to keep him there, I mean, they have their QB for many more years. I think Arizona State does, and I like what you brought up about Texas's defense being on the field because I was live and covering the game, and that's something I noticed. I forget if it was second quarter or third quarter, but I noticed, hey, I don't think Arizona State's going to come back, but they're keeping Texas's offense off the field. They're forcing them to either get quick touchdowns or to have quick 3-and-outs and punt, and that Texas defense is on the field forever. Like it's at some point they might just break, and they made a valiant effort. I mean, they kept Arizona State off of or out of the red zone and out of the end zone for so many minutes on so many drives. I think at one point Arizona State was 1 of 4 on fourth down. They blocked a field goal, had a goal line stand, and then the safety is really what started all of it, where they punched the ball out of Wisner's hands, and that just Arizona State did a very good job D-line versus O-line, which shocked me just a little bit because while Texas has had issues rushing the football, it's also an Arizona State defense that has some players, but is just not quite at that level, and they're more known for their offense. It was really interesting. I thought that how at the end of the day, Texas was clearly the better team, but Arizona State played a really good game plan where they outgained Texas, they kept them off the field, they ruled the TOP, and they kept to their identity. I mean, running Scatabo was not very successful early on, but as the game went on, eventually things started opening up as they kept Texas on the field and Levitt was making his proper reads and throws. How much did that game change your perception of Texas, or did it not really because of the many recurring themes that have been with Texas all season
Yeah,
long?
it didn't change. It didn't change anything, honestly. So I went into the game saying I didn't think Texas was going to run the ball. ASU has had a decent rush defense all year long, and so outside boundary zone. That's Texas's that's Sark's bread and butter when it comes to running the ball, right? So the way they run outside boundary zone, I'm going to say something here, and people have to bear with me. Sark invented their style of outside boundary zone. He's not the first guy to run zone to the outside. Okay, let me clarify that. But the way that they run outside boundary zone, he invented it, and people in the NFL, like Shanahan, does a lot of Sark's concepts now in the NFL. It's why when Shanahan took the job with the 49ers and went from the Falcons, one of the reasons the Falcons hired Sark was because they ran a lot of similar concepts in the run game that then set up play action off of it. So the way you stop that is you keep contained on the outsides. Unfortunately, Ohio State's the number one team at keeping contained on outside zone runs this year, but that's for later in the segment. So I thought ASU would sell out to stop it, and they did. They did sell out to stop it. It's why on the first drive, they had 2 pass plays, and were in the end zone like that because ASU was keeping contained, thinking that Texas would come out and run the ball first. They ran a quick slant, and then they ran the wheel route. Both were wide open, and both were touchdowns. Texas got away from the beaters a little bit as the game went on. You didn't really see many more slants again opening up across the middle until late when they needed it. They hit the one to Wingo. They hit the one to Golden in the fourth quarter. They were there all day. I don't really know why Texas didn't attack it. That is, if a team's going to do that to you, if they're going to set that contain on the outside, well, then you need to take advantage of the middle of the field. And when Texas did, it was there, and they took advantage of it, and they just went away from it, unfortunately. That's Sark for you. He's a lot of things. He's one of the most brilliant offensive minds, but there's some maddening things he does during game decisions. But it didn't really change anything for me. People are making a lot of the fact that they gave up that many points to Arizona State. I'm really not. It was 24-8 with 6 minutes left. If Manny Muhammad bats that ball down, they take the ball over midfield. They probably go down and get a score with a minute 30 left, 2 minutes left, and it's 30. It's either 27-8 or 31-8, and it's game over. It really didn't change. The only thing that I did take away from it a little bit is Quinn has now played 3 good games in a row, starting with the SEC championship game against Georgia, where PFF had him as the highest graded player on the field between both teams. Then into the Clemson game, where outside of the 4th and 2, where he threw behind Ryan Wingo that could have probably ended it, he was close to perfect in that one. And then the ASU game, he was perfect in 4th quarter and OT when they needed him. Obviously, he wasn't 100% perfect up until that point. He threw the pick, but they haven't been Alabama last year, Oklahoma State Big 12 title, or Michigan this year caliber, but he's played 3 really good games in a row now, and the ankle does seem to be fine. So that, if anything, I was a little encouraged by the fact that they got tested. Now everyone thinks they're not any good, and they still won the game to get to Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that it was encouraging to see that because it was 3rd and goal, it was 17-8, and you really needed a touchdown if you were Texas to keep the momentum going. And the fact that he made that scramble was impressive, and I think showed that his ankle's pretty close to as good as it gets, in a sense. Yeah. And as for me, the only thing it didn't really change much of anything from my perspective on Texas, outside of the fact that it just reinforced in my mind that I can't trust Sarkisian to be one of the best game managers in the country, because I thought they kind of kept ASU in the game. It was similar with Clemson, where you start off hot and you're doing some really good things, but then there's just, I don't know what it is, but it's something about, like you said, because it was the case last year, 3rd quarter, things get bogged down. Like TCU almost came back against Texas last year. Kansas State, at one point, Texas was almost a lock to win. They force it to OT, have a chance to win. I don't know exactly what it is, and I still think Sark overall.
Houston, TCU, every game last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, literally every game last year.
Yeah.
It seemed to have gotten a little bit better this year, and now it's reared its head again. Georgia, it reared its head again there. They just didn't score the points in the first half, so it was still a 6-3 game. But they dominated the entire first half, right, in the SEC title game. They dominated the game against Clemson. Like I said, that one was a little bit better because in that drive in the 3rd quarter, they actually did get all the way down to 1st and goal at the 3. They just didn't punch it in. And then the game against ASU, it's always been an issue from him. It was an issue for him when he was at USC and when he was at Washington. As an offensive play caller, when he wasn't the head coach, it's been a little bit of an issue for him. It got masked by when he was at Alabama, because Alabama was just so much better in 2020 than everybody. But you can never trust a Texas lead heading into the second half, and going up against Ohio State, who's arguably the best second half team in the country, given that Jim Knowles is definitely the best second half defensive coordinator in the country. I mean, they gave up their first 3rd quarter touchdown all season to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. It's a concern. I don't know how, if one thing I will almost guarantee you, if Texas has a lead heading into halftime, there will be a Baldfather bet placed on Ohio State's second half line. I can almost guarantee it, because they have issues in the second half, and Ohio State exploits everybody in the second half. So it's what you have to trust that it would happen again in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is an appropriate segue into talking about this game, where Ohio State right now looks like the best team in college football, and they're the overwhelming favorite, not just to win this game, but also to beat whoever the Orange Bowl winner is, whether that be Notre Dame or whether that be Penn State. And what I think is really intriguing about this matchup here in the Cotton Bowl is, it is a little bit of kind of a Texas home friendly environment, But what's even more interesting is the fact that I think that these two teams, the biggest difference between them is that Ohio State's figured out their ceiling, and it feels like Texas is not even close to figuring out its ceiling. Like the sputtering, the inconsistency, they have NFL talent everywhere. They're very fast, but the offense is at times a mess, at times looks brilliant. The defense, I think the defense is figured out, but the offense doesn't help because it either seems like they get good drives or have quick 3-and-outs. So that doesn't help the defense's case. And then for Ohio State, they didn't really figure out their ceiling at all in the regular season either. I mean, that was the Nebraska, the Michigan game, the Oregon game, the Penn State game with several turnovers that Penn State forced. But now Tennessee, they got destroyed. They destroyed Oregon in what I thought was the best game played by an Ohio State team since I don't even know if Ryan Day's ever coached a game better than that. I mean, I don't think Oregon is a national championship caliber team of like last year or 2022, but to be up 34-0 on a 13-0 team whose top 10 is pretty impressive. So what's your early angle on this game? Do you have anything to caution people about, or any bold opinions? I mean, what do you think is going on here?
So I released a kind of a public service, a PSA, yesterday on my channel to kind of warn everyone. Pundits on TV right now, and if you follow, sports betting people, you follow channels like that, they're not even talking about whether or not Ohio State's going to cover this spread. They're talking about, should you alternate spread it to Ohio State -14 or Ohio State -10. I warn everyone on that. When people start talking like that, it's usually not a good sign for that team. And that doesn't, we haven't made an official pick yet at Baldfather Bets on the line at 6. So I'm not saying what the pick is. We tend to do that closer towards game time after we can monitor line movement. But the Ohio State is by far, I've said since, and you've known this, we've been talking throughout the year, I've had Ohio State #1 in my power rankings every week. I never wavered from it. I've said they were the best team in the country, and I never came off of it.
Yeah, guys, he's ahead of the curve. I mean, he's been on this, I think, before anyone else I've known, outside of this one guy on Twitter who is not typically as ahead of the curve as you are.
I've said since when they lost to Oregon, I said, no, they're still the best team in the country. When they lost to Michigan, I questioned Ryan Day some for the first time ever in his tenure, because it was just such a coaching malpractice in that game. But I still had them #1 in my part. I said, they're still the best team in the country. It doesn't change anything. They just had one of the worst game plans I've ever seen in my life. I was on Oregon plus the 4. I thought Oregon would beat them out in Austin in the regular season, but I still said Ohio State's the best team. And honestly, they're a phantom PI call on Jeremiah Smith away from winning that game too, and then they would have been 11-1 in the regular season. So I thought Ohio State's been the best team in the country. I haven't wavered from it. Where I'm gonna, I guess, give people a little bit of caution here. Texas is the second best team in the country. I couldn't put them ahead of Oregon. Even though I thought they were always better than Oregon, I couldn't put them out of Oregon just because Oregon was undefeated and they had beaten Ohio State, who I said was the best. Then they beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, scoring 45 points in doing so. But I told, we were talking leading up to the Rose Bowl, and I told you there was just something about Oregon's defense that I didn't trust. And you asked me, well, if I got +3.5, would I still take Ohio State at -3.5? And I said, yeah, I would. Because the Oregon defense this year, I always thought was a bit of a paper tiger. I didn't think that when push came to shove that they really could stop a truly explosive offense. And then when Penn State did what they did to them in the Big Ten championship game and almost rushing for 300 yards, I was like, okay, no, that's Oregon's defense. So Texas is not Oregon. Texas is, they both were finalists for the Joe Moore Award. Both of Texas's tackles will go in the first round of the NFL draft. So Kelvin Banks Jr. will probably be the second tackle taken after LSU's name escapes me. But then Cameron Williams will go later on in the first round. Jake Majors will probably be the first center off the board, given that McLaughlin suffered the Achilles injury. And then DJ Campbell is also going to go. Guards usually don't get taken in the first round, but he will also be either a day 2 or a early day 3 pick. So Texas has a different offensive line. They have the number 2 ranked defense in the country. They hit very hard. They're not like a soft defense. So this game, while it seems, it's so obvious that Ohio State's going to win, I just caution people. And if you are going to place a bet on it, don't get crazy with alternate spreads. Don't, go mortgage your house to bet Ohio State the way some people are saying you should, the way like Portnoy and stuff is saying you should. Just everybody needs to, I guess, kind of pump the brakes a little bit. One of the things that you look at in football betting a lot is better QB, better O-line combo. And most of the time, better QB, better O-line combo ends up winning the game. And Texas has the better QB, better O-line combo, I think, by a mile. I think the QB is a little closer. The O-line is not even in question.
Yes.
That's not even in question. You could make an argument for Howard because he has a better QBR, and there's been times this year where Quinn has played poor. I think right now with a healthy Quinn is the better quarterback. I mean, Quinn will be probably the 3rd or 4th quarterback taken in the draft after Shedeur and after Cam Ward. If he beats Ohio State and wins the national title, he may jump ahead of Cam Ward and back into the first round. But the O-line, there's not even we talked about this. If you compare every position across the board, Ohio State has more positions where they're better than Texas. There is no discrepancy or gap that is as big as the offensive line gap between Texas and Ohio State.
Oh, yeah, because Ohio State has one actual NFL player currently on the O-line, and Donovan Jackson. For Texas, it's like all 5, if not 4 at the minimum of their O-line starters, and maybe some of their 2 deep is considered as like NFL players. It's crazy. And I think that, my prediction was that I released it this morning, guys, by the way. So if you haven't already, link to that's going to be in the pinned comment for the Texas-Ohio State preview. I only picked Ohio State to win, and yes, it was covering the spread, but only by 1 point. I only picked them to win by a touchdown, like 24-17, mainly for the reasons that you brought up with like the second half. Like, I just think Ohio State overall is a team who will have an easier time marching down the field and scoring when they need to. And I do think their defense is better coordinated and overall just better in terms of like talent and players as well. But the O-line, and not just the O-line, but like the line of scrimmage mismatch is the path for Texas to win here. Like they don't have to score 30 or 40. They don't have to do what Oregon did, where Oregon had to hit explosives. They had to come up with a great offensive game plan, and they did the first time around. The first time around, Stein put Knowles in a blender, which rarely anyone does. And that's how they won, but they only won by a point because Ohio State was able to consistently get down the field through the air. Here, I think that Texas can win with a combined total of like maybe 40 to 50 points or something like that because of their mismatch in the trenches. So what are some reasons why you think, we talked about this, but what are some reasons why you think Texas can win this football game?
Yeah, so I'm gonna two that I'm not gonna give. They're just too obvious to give. So, home game for Texas, I'm not gonna give that one. Number 1 pass defense in the country statistically, I'm not gonna give that one. And you know that I think that's actually a little bit of a paper tiger too. I actually think Texas has a better run defense than they do pass defense. I just don't think they really went up against any quarterbacks that exploited.
Yeah. When the toughest QB you go up against is either Levitt or
exactly.
Beck.
I mean, I would say it's Klubnik, and Klubnik hit. He was very effective through the air. So, like I said, I think that the pass defense it's good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Jade Barron's Jim Thorpe Award winner for a reason. They have excellent safeties. It's good. They finally have a pass rush. But yeah, so I'm not going to give those two. So if we're going to give 10 reasons, I'll go through them quickly. Reasons 1 through 3 are the offensive line. For what I just explained, they are by far the best offensive line that Ohio State will play. Not close in any regard. I understand that Oregon was also a Joe Moore Award winner, but the talent level on Oregon's offensive line versus the talent level on Texas's offensive line are not in the same category. Oregon was a very effective offensive line all year long, but they don't have the same physical size, strength, and just overall NFL caliber that they do. Reason 4 for his, much crap we just talked about him. Sark is still, he can game plan as good as anyone. He's done it before. He will have them in a position where they will do some things that could exploit maybe what Knowles is going to do. So what Knowles is going to do is he's going to put 3 high safety in because that's what Sark struggles with the most. What makes Ohio State so effective at 3 high safety is one of them is Downs. And what Downs has been doing is he's been staying in that kind of 10 to 12 yardage range, and then he's free to essentially be like a rover, almost like in softball, where like he can kind of go do whatever he wants to do because he's so intelligent and he reads plays so well and everything. I think Sark will have a few answers for that. We've talked about a potential of 6 offensive linemen or 5 wide, so that Downs has to commit to something. So then it takes away the guesswork for Quinn. So Quinn knows, okay, they're disguising in 3 high safety, but actually this is cover 2 or this is cover 4, or hey, this is man with a cover 1 robber. So Sark has the ability to do those things. He has the ability to have some more packages for Arch that could exploit some issues that I think you can get Ohio State in if they overcommit on things, especially if you have a mobile quarterback. So that's reason 4. Reason 5 is Quinn. We talked about it. I watched Quinn play the game at Alabama. I was there in Tuscaloosa. That's as good as I've ever seen a college quarterback play a game in which they were clearly overmatched by another team. Texas was a good team last year. Heading into that game, Texas wasn't what they are now. They didn't have the confidence that they have now. They hadn't proven anything yet. Xavier Worthy hadn't really proven what he was yet. A.D. Mitchell had just transferred. Quinn played perfect in that game against Alabama. He played perfect in the game against Michigan. For as difficult of a season as Michigan had, week 2 Michigan defense was still very good. When they had everybody healthy, when they had the whole defensive line healthy, when they were healthy in the secondary, they were a good defense, and Quinn really picked them apart.
Yeah.
So Quinn has played some of the best college football I've seen. Will Howard has never had a ceiling like Quinn has had. So he can absolutely win them the game. When I get then into reasons 6 through 10, 6 and 7 are similar. So 6 is physicality. We've talked about this. Ohio State's played 3 teams, in my opinion, this year that could match them: physicality, size, speed, all that stuff. They scored 21 against Nebraska. They scored 20 against Penn State, and they scored 10 against Michigan.
Yep.
So there is a recipe there where a team who has the size and the speed and the physical nature on the line of scrimmage can slow them down, especially on the offensive side. Penn State a little bit less. Ohio State had some self-inflicted wounds, like the Howard fumble that went outside when they were probably going to score another touchdown there. But they can be got. Ohio State can be got in terms of physicality and stuff. And, we've talked about people are comparing them to like 2019 LSU and everything like that. Nobody got LSU like that. Like nobody slowed them down at all, ever. So I do think that with how the discrepancy on that line of scrimmage and the fact that everyone's just kind of forgetting that Ohio State's offensive line isn't good, and they're acting like Justin Fry is, all of a sudden a good offensive line coach and everything, which I don't understand. McLaughlin's not coming back. Like Simmons isn't coming back for these games. They're still out. They're still out. So it just the physicality at the line of scrimmage for sure. The game could be over, and you're like, Ohio State never had the opportunity to really get their skill players involved as much as they need to because they got whipped up front, and that was the game. So that's a big one. And then it goes into 7, pass rush. Texas has one of the best pass rushers in the country. So they have 44 sacks on the year. I think they're 5th in NCAA at 44. Ohio State is 3rd at 47. But the difference is Texas's pass rush is going to be going up against Ohio State's offensive line, whereas Ohio State's pass rush is going to be going up against Texas's offensive line. That's a mismatch one way. The other way, it's strength on strength. So Texas will bring a pass rush that is different from what Ohio State has seen previously. Colin Simmons is currently the number 1 edge rusher off of 2027 draft boards. And he won Freshman of the Year. He's All-American freshman. He competed for just an All-American spot all over. If you haven't watched him play, if anyone hasn't watched him play, hopefully they enjoy seeing him in the Cotton Bowl. But he's the real deal for sure. And then on the other end, you have Trey Moore, the transfer from UTSA. You have Ethan Burke. You have Barron Sorrell. You have multiple people that they line up on that other end that stay fresh as the game goes on. They get pressure from the outside in, and then they can also blitz linebackers to keep it to where, you can't move the pocket up. So pass rush is the real deal for Texas. And Ohio State, I don't think, has an offensive line that can really stop a legit pass rush. 8 is coaching familiarity. So Johnny Nansen, co-defensive coordinator, he was on Chip Kelly's staff at UCLA. He was at Arizona, then later went up against Chip Kelly while he was at UCLA. PK was at Boise when he was going up against Chip Kelly when Chip Kelly was at Oregon. They played each other multiple times. Sark played Jim Knowles when Knowles was 2021 at Oklahoma State. It was very similar to everything before, had a lot of success early and then got shut down in the second half. But these guys know each other, and they know each other at kind of multiple levels of the coaching. I won't go through every single one, but they know each other at multiple levels of the coaching staff. So when you have that familiarity, usually you kind of understand what the other person's going to do. So, I mean, that one could go both ways, honestly, but that's potential that it goes Texas's way. And then for reasons 9 and 10, I'll give you, these are more what ifs. They're not just like solid reasons. What if this whole Ohio State thing is a mirage? The Tennessee game and the Oregon game, right? So the Tennessee game, I think you and I were pretty step in step with that one, that I thought Tennessee never had a chance in that game. So the Tennessee was their weakness was always their secondary on that team, and I thought the offense, Nico just isn't there yet. So outside of Samson running, they couldn't do much. If you're one dimensional against Ohio State, you have very little chance, especially if that one dimension is running. If you can throw and that's your one dimension, you at least have a little bit of a chance, but it's very difficult if your one dimension is running and then defensively you're going to get got through the air. So I never really thought that didn't surprise me at all. I know you were a little bit more surprised by the Oregon game. I wasn't. I'd been on Ohio State the whole time against Oregon. I thought Oregon's defense was a paper tiger. I thought that Ohio State had a lot of motivation in both games. They had a lot of motivation in the Tennessee game because it was the game after Michigan. They had a lot of motivation against Oregon because they lost to Oregon the first time around. Can they get up again, for a third game in a row? And are they more somewhere in the middle of what they were against Michigan and Nebraska versus what they were against Oregon and Tennessee? Are we acting like they're the greatest thing ever when maybe they're not? And then that feeds into number 10. What if Texas is just better, like roster wise? And they're both in the top 5 of 247 sports team composite talent, right? And 5 to 6 is where you notice that number gap.
Oh, yeah.
Really big this year, right? So they're both within a range of, margin of error with each other, we'll say. I think Quinn's better than Howard. I think you think Howard's better than Quinn, but it's arguable. You can
exactly like there's a debate.
There's a debate for sure. Offensive line, I don't think there's a debate.
No, there's not.
Skill positions, there's not a debate. They're Ohio State, but it's not like Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, and Matthew Golden are slouches, and it's not like Jaden Blue and Quintravion Wisner are slouches. They're all NFL players, so they're good. Tight end, there's also not a debate, and that one goes to Texas. Gunnar Helm is arguably the second best tight end in the country this year after Warren, and he does a lot in the run game that Jatavian Sanders last year wasn't able to do for Texas. So they're on the offensive side. You could make an argument that Texas is the better team. Because the skill level for Ohio State is better, but it's not as much better as Texas's offensive line is than their offensive line. Defensive side, these are the two best defenses in the country statistically. Ohio State's 1, Texas is 2, but they're miles ahead of the next people statistically. Yes. Their pass rushes are very, very similar. But like I said, Ohio State's pass rush is going to be going up against Texas's offensive line, whereas Texas's pass rush is going up against Ohio State's offensive line. In the secondary, for sure, Ransom and Downs are better, but it's another one where it's not like Taff and Egbuka, are slouches either. They have a lot of interceptions. Taff was an all-SEC snub for sure. He was one of the better players in the country. He hits very, very hard. And then they didn't really get tested against Tennessee or against Oregon, but Burke and for sure Igmanosin, they have been Igmanosin for sure. They've been liabilities almost all year long. They've been liabilities, and they, especially with the pass interference calls, how many that they've had thrown against them. So, I mean, Jahdae Barron won the Thorpe Award. So, at cornerback, Texas is better. Muhammad hasn't been as good as he was last year, but he's similar to Burke, where they were better last year than they are this year. They have a high ceiling. So, what if Texas is just the better team? Like, there's an argument to be made for it. I'm not saying that I think it. I thought Ohio State was the best team in the country all year long, but they're within a margin of error with each other that I could be wrong. I could be wrong that Ohio State's the best team in the country and actually Texas is the best team in the country.
Yeah.
I think it's a big what if.
Yeah, it could be that like Texas has kind of just been playing with food and figuring themselves out like Ohio State has, and they just kind of like click right here. Mm-hmm. And if they do that in like the Cotton Bowl environment, I can see that really taking off. I think that it's so interesting talking about these two different rosters because, Blue Chip Ratio says it's obvious that it's Ohio State, and I'd say Ohio State is the better roster. But Texas has potentially the more balanced roster. I don't know if I would go that far just with the offensive line that they have. They don't have that same glaring, like Texas's glaring weakness, if anything, possibly because of the injuries and stuff, might be running back, but running back isn't as important of a position as the O-line. Like your O-line is what makes your offense much more than your running backs. And to circle back to what you said about like Justin Fry and all that, like I've given him credit after the Rose Bowl. I don't think maybe he's not as bad as I thought he was, but I'm holding off of, totally going off of that because in that game, Ohio State came out and what did they do? They passed to the outside and they passed quickly and they got their players in space. And when they ran, it was all outside stuff, all of it. Like we are going to go away from our interior O-line because Derek Harmon exists. And even though Oregon's defense, I was wrong on this. He was right. Even though Oregon's defense was a paper tiger, there was one area where they were having some success, and that was D-tackle on center and on guard.
They got through multiple times.
Yes, and it was only like a difference between a second or so whether it was going to be, a touchdown pass, which was beautifully schemed by Kelly, and Smith executed that very well. Howard did well too. But there is that point where I don't think Ohio State's ceiling is a mirage, but I don't think you're saying that. I think you're saying that you can't play. It's hard to play to your ceiling all the time. Like at some point, you're going to come back down to earth. And there is, I said this to you. I forget. I think I said this to you early on, even after the Rose Bowl, that I think that Texas can do to Ohio State what Nebraska, Penn State, and Michigan did. And
Yeah.
some will say that's about game plan, and part of it is. But I thought that Ohio State coached circles around Penn State, and they
Yeah.
coached a really good game, and they still only scored 20 points. Like, I just think there are inherent roster limitations. It's like Ohio State, they're not 2019 LSU. They're
No.
just not. They're not 2001 Miami. Like, I'm not saying they're not an elite team. I think they're the best team in the country. I'm picking them to win. But they have roster limitations where if you can get pressure on them, or if you can make it harder for Jeremiah Smith, just a little bit harder for him to get open or for him to make his catches, you can do things to Ohio State. I don't think they're invincible, and I think that it's so interesting going from Oregon OSU, where the majority of the public was on Oregon, and there was kind of a debate about who was going to win, to now I don't
It's like
see
a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's no one, and
No one. I haven't seen a single person pick Texas. Not
no,
one.
I
Yeah.
haven't. I'm probably more on the Texas side, even though I'm picking Ohio State to cover, because I'm only picking them to win by 7,
By 7. Yeah.
which is insane.
It is insane. It's like I said, when people start talking this way, it usually is dangerous in football, predictions and procrastinations and all that stuff. These teams are closer than I think the immediate aftermath of watching Ohio State and Oregon in the Rose Bowl and watching Texas and ASU in the Peach Bowl would indicate. And the other one too, I mean, like, yeah, I did think Ohio State was going to beat Oregon, and it was going to be, wouldn't be an issue. But I was surprised. I mean, Oregon trying to play Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka man, and then just not even covering Jeremiah Smith actually on a few plays was an interesting decision by them. So I don't think Texas will do that. I think they will have a plan to take those people away, and then what happens? The greatest teams of all time, 2001 Miami, 2019 LSU, 95 Nebraska, they could run the ball up the middle. What if that stuff gets taken away, and then what Texas is giving Ohio State is runs up the middle, but they just can't do it. They can't execute it.
That's what Michigan did. Michigan said,
Exactly.
if you can run up the middle, do it.
Do it.
But you can't. Nebraska did that too. For Penn State, it was a little easier, but again, they had McLaughlin. They don't have McLaughlin anymore. And I wonder, like, if you play that game again and they don't have McLaughlin, like,
how does it go?
Exactly. I still think with Franklin they probably win, but you just, it's the little things add up, especially in matchups like this where these teams are really good. And while I'm picking Ohio State to win, I'm a little bit nervous because when everyone's picking one team, not only can that sometimes be willful ignorance, but players read this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you see like Ohio State or Texas players like go on social media after their wins and like call out people who weren't believing in them or so on. Like, players read this stuff. Like, they soak this in. There's actually a former Buckeye who won it all with Tressel, like on the 2002 team, who's been saying for a few days now, like he's a little bit concerned that the focus is not right because like everyone is picking them. That'll probably be a reason. Everyone on my deep dive, it'll be like reason 10 because it's not that important. It's more of a what if. But there is something called fade the public for a reason, especially when it's this. I mean, this is bigger than people being on Oregon against Ohio State because that was a debate. This is a foregone conclusion right now. So I'm curious to see what happens here. Thank you for coming on and giving us reasons and analysis. It was very insightful. Again, check out Baldfather Bets on YouTube. He wins a lot, and he's very insightful. We talk back and forth, and I can tell you that I've learned a lot from him this year, and that there are a few times where I've gotten him in picks, but it's typically he who has gotten me on the pick side. So check out his channel, and again, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to give a Patreon shout out before we get out of here. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Connor Little OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, Tyler Nye for being All-American members. And John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Thank you for being all-conference members. Check out my merchandise store, Patreon page, Discord server, and more in the description through links or down below in the pinned comment. Go Longhorns and go Buckeyes. I will see you all very soon. Have a great day.